and then you get into the question of like, yes, they do have control of the experimental weapons, and how are we going to make sure that they didn't go around and use these? And how do you even imprison a ship that can teleport anyway?
There's a lot of good plot in those types of setups. I'm going to shift tracks a little bit. We've obviously seen a lot of rapid progress in AI development recently. Our space-flight technology is becoming increasingly miniaturized. I have a friend who runs a fleet of CubeSats around the Earth doing their conservation science. We're seeing a lot more in the way of advances in energy, storage, creation, propulsion technologies. Are we on the cusp of genuine AI starships? Aliette, I think you're probably best placed to speak to this one.
Quite frankly, we can't even make computers think in a somewhat coherent fashion, and we also can't always reliably launch a spaceship towards more than Earth orbits. So I'm dubious. I love the idea, don't get me wrong, but I'm also like, I don't think we have the technology. But there's certainly been a lot of interesting progress in all kinds of like fuels and in all kind of series of progress and like all the robots and everything that gets deployed into space. And I think there's a really interesting, but also they're not what I would call space. Well, to me, a starship should actually be carrying people. Then if we're talking about something that is not carrying people, that's an interesting thing, because we can pretty much do that with some reasonable input. So that doesn't seem so far out. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, but I feel if you don't have to, basically the truth is, humans are like terminally unsuited to space, because that is not what we're meant to be surviving. So if we don't have to worry about keeping the humans alive, then there's a lot fewer constraints in the actual design.
Does anyone want to add to that? Because I'd like to I've got another follow-up. So Xuya,
Yeah. So coming at it from a little bit from the neuroscience side of things as well, I would say we don't have a good definition yet of what sentience or consciousness is, not even really of intelligence. So these are all words that people think they intuitively know what it means, but we also done a little bit of work in machine intelligence, and it's like we keep moving the goalposts, right? When our machines are intelligent enough, when are they self-aware enough, right? How much of it is real? Because it's hard for us to believe that we built it and it can be its own entity. And I think until we have a better foundational understanding of how we ourselves work, how our brains work, what these very nebulous terms actually mean, and can we identify something that is sentient, that is a machine, when it's right in front of us, it's pretty hard to lean into the concept of, we're getting close to achieving that with our spacecraft. But I'm totally with Aliette on the robots that are going out to Mars, the spacecraft. I think even, a lot of the Dragon capsules and stuff are...
Yeah, we landed something on the comet.
Right?
Yeah, we're going to send one towards the sun.
And things are, they're docking themselves. Like, there's a lot of very intelligent operations happening. It's not human-type intelligence, right? So we're not to our magical space planes yet, because we're not mimicking the biology of it so much, but they are very, very intelligent in their own way.
The ones that are fascinating are the little swarms of robots that then do we're going to map this environment that we don't really know, and we're going to do it like collaboratively. And that was kind of the inspiration for the boss and the studio stories. And like, who would have believed, right?
But I think it's an area where society, and particularly science fiction fans in general, we want it to happen even if it isn't happening yet. If you look at, you mentioned the Philae lander on the Comet, and the social media team from ESA that worked with the sort of the cartoon versions of Rosetta and Philae, and the little landers sort of being dropped off and waving goodbye and being very much sort of anthropomorphized. It really sort of speaks to the way we invest personalities into our machines, I think.
We are really, really good at investing personality in things. This is one of our I don't know if it's character assets or character flow, or really both, but those are the two things that we're really good at. It's like investing money into things and narrative. Like, it causes a lot of problems because you cannot craft a narrative engine, and sometimes you need to. And it also our very strength because we can do that, and really hard, for instance, for our machine to do that.
So we've been thinking a little bit about the fact that humans aren't really designed to be in space, and space is notoriously hard. What aspects of real science do you sort of brush away with sufficient hand waving to make your starships plausible within their settings?
I've got people being injected with ground squirrel DNA to help prevent muscle atrophy, so because why not?
Never dealt with ground squirrels, you know, that would really work.
Yeah, well, I've always thought that when it came to being a crewman on an intelligent starship, it's probably not something you want to be an early adopter of. Having, you know, I mean, if we go by the self-driving cars that we have at the moment, it's likely to crash into a sun, or you know, you say, take me to Jupiter, and it will say, did you say Jupiter? I have 5,000 Google results.
I think the worry there is not big smart objects, but big dumb objects.
So until they get the crinkles ironed out and they stop them being murdery or incompetent, I wouldn't really want to go on. I haven't seen, you know, 2001. Or that recent thing that they said happened, and then they said it didn't happen, with the simulation where the drone decided that the best way to, a military drone decided the best way to complete its operation was if it destroyed its operator, who kept telling it not to kill everything.
I thought communications a lot. I'm like, okay, we have networked things, and when you have big objects in orbit around places, that is really not how it works, right? But I'm like, they need to be projecting avatars, and they need to be like picking up things, and I'm like, okay, I am designing things for a living, and I know exactly that the bandwidth does not exist for that kind of thing. I'm going to pretend we have no bandwidth.
Orbital dynamics are strictly advisory.
I'm just going to take the whole Ansible thing a step forward, like one step further ahead, like, yeah, it works. Trust me, it works. And when I like it, there's lag. For dramatic purposes.
I went deep into genetic engineering, and said, okay, what if 1,000 years from now the society can basically use genes like building blocks? How would we build people who can live in a vacuum of space? And so I just kind of went all out and had a lot of fun, because it was the summer of 2020 and I needed to have a lot of fun. So they have, their skin is basically, honestly, I borrowed a lot from Earth life for all of this, right? Because this has to go in their DNA, so I'm like, we have the building blocks if we only knew how to put them together in a way that resulted in something functional. So there's these very deep sea creatures, they're volcanic vents that have overlapping iron scales for skin, so that's the skin of the alloys. They have beautiful wings made of solar fabric, so that's where they get their energy. It's primarily from the sun. They hydrolyze water to produce oxygen and hydrogen. And they have vents in their bodies, which they vent that hydrogen out, basically direct motion locally. There are these really big fancy things called wombs, where if you take a lot of damage, you can reattach to an umbilical of the womb, and it will basically give you a sort of rebirth. You might lose some memories along the way, but you know, at least you get a fresh start. And then within their bodies, the alloys who are pilots, because not all of them are, have chambers where they can carry human beings that are basically made of walls made of calcium carbonate, like a snail shell, basically. So yeah, so I just kind of stole very, very liberally from earth biology to make these creatures, and just for fun, I wanted them to be space mermaids, because I'm like, you don't need legs if you're living in the macro space and you're never ever going to be on planets, so they have tails. And then the communication thing, I was like, crap, there's no air. So how are they going to talk to each other? I was like, yeah, they could do some sort of electromagnetic impact thing, and that's fine, they have that, but that's not very exciting. So I went for chromatophores, because that's a much more personal way to communicate, and it's easier to keep secrets, because if you're far enough away, nobody can see what you're flashing out and saying to each other.
And everybody secretly wants chromatophores.
Right?
So a lot of the starships in your fiction are female gendered, not exclusively, but there is a definite sort of trend in many of these examples of this trope. Do we think that that is simply an extension of the traditions of the Age of Sail? Or are there cases where having an untouchable, impervious protagonist provides a perfect vehicle for exploration of gender roles?
I think it probably is a hangover that ships tend to be called she.
Not in mine, no. I just wanted female characters.
But I mean, in Trouble Dog's pack, there are different genders of ship depending on who they were cloned from. Sorry, I've no idea what the answer to that question is.
I think it does give you a chance to have, and I'm saying this mostly speculatively, because I would say that most of the, not most of the sentient ships, but the sentient ships that we get to see the most of in my work tend to be I'm doing a census in my head. They're pretty evenly divided by gender. And I think there's even a space station that uses they, them pronouns, because why not? The way, but speaking more generally, I think that there is a power fantasy there, you know, that you have, and this is I mean, I don't know, I'm groping towards something and I'm not quite finding it. I want to talk about Leckie a little bit, where everyone is gendered. People have different genders, but there's only one set of pronouns, and there's only one set of pronouns used for the ships. And how that affects the zeitgeist of those books, because not everyone in those books is female, but everyone is she. And I feel like that divorces character from gender in a really interesting way. Not quite sure where I was going with that, but
There was one, I mean, fine, I'm going to go totally off piece, but I think there was a great discussion of like various translators of how Leckie's work, and so how he worked in different languages, right? For instance, Finnish has no gender pronouns, you know, just like, and there were other languages where you had many more pronouns, and you were just like, okay, and now what do we do, right? So it was a series of very interesting reflections, I think, on how gender is a cultural performance as well, right? So I thought that was really interesting, and I know we've strayed some.
no, I think you just came up with the thesis statement that I was trying to come up with. So thank you.
And I mean, I feel like we have plenty of examples of ship AIs that are not female. I think where it tends to skew female is in that maritime tradition, or I would also say often when there are male captains or pilots associated with the ship, right? A lot of men refer to their cars with female pronouns, you know, ships as well, right? And so when you go to that tradition of my vehicle is female, I think that's where, because right on the card, I was looking, they bring up HAL 9000. HAL was definitely male coded. The AI in Merlin for D6 Wakes is male coded. In my books, they are all genders, and many of them are agender and use their gender pronouns. So, yeah, I think it really has to do, as you say, it's more a reflection of the society and how they treat and how they view these spacecraft in terms of, and of course, obviously, the author's personal biases coming into it and writing it, and how they tend to gender vehicles today.
I think I know this is what they intended it was to do with actors leaving and stuff, but in Red Dwarf, when Holly became female Holly, and it just, okay, it's a spaceship, why not? Yeah, it's just changing pixels on a screen, so.
So we quite often see galaxy-spanning exploration in works of fiction using sentient ships. Quite often you'll see interspecies or intersystem conflicts. And I think these are also very similar tropes to Age of Sail narratives. Do you think that these narratives have evolved substantially? Because a lot of the old Age of Sail narratives are fundamentally colonialistic and awful in many ways. Are we creating better ways of doing those exploration tropes than we used to?
We're trying. We are trying. I don't, you know, I can't judge whether or not I personally am succeeding. But I'm doing my best.
There is still an audience, I think, that kind of military science, based on Hornblower and space kind of adventure. But yeah, that's, you know, I guess we were trying to put that in a slightly more original configuration. I think the idea of empires is ridiculous unless you have utterly sort of crowds because you're so strung out. You know, but then we have the British Empire in the Age of Sail, it's a very similar setup. I think a lot of people kind of use that model for interstellar things that, you know, nothing in the 19th century, a letter couldn't go faster than a ship, so the ship was the fastest way to communicate. And so in a lot of sci-fi universes, the ship is the fastest way to communicate between worlds because we don't have instantaneous communication for some reason. So yeah, then again, it's a lot easier just to, you know, you have shipping, you know, goods that trade between worlds. It's a lot easier just to go there, build a factory, do it there. But on the other hand, huge space battles are just a lot of fun.
They are.
Okay, we are getting tight on time. I do think we can keep on talking about this for several days. I'm going to hand over to questions from the audience. I do have a microphone, and I will go charge around a little bit. Oh, questions online. Let's go to the voices online.
So, early on, Aliette talked about the longevity of sentient ships. Given how much our own culture has changed over the decades, and how often we program in bias, what are the odds of older starships having old-fashioned biases over time? How will that affect the culture?
Oh, that's a great question.
Well, that one's really easy for me because there is a character who is very old and he even uses he pronouns and he is very conservative and likes the old ways. So yeah, I think, you know, when the characters are part of society and not just really smart vehicles, it's easier to kind of interrogate those types of narratives and incorporate those types of plots?
My fictions really depends. There's some really old ones that I've kept up with the times and some that haven't. I did have a very old space station where we was like, we kind of don't know how to fix that anymore because I'm an engineer, but that's more like, you know, practical things. And well, to me it's a kind of people are people, and you will, you know, I have seen pretty old people in my family who are super progressive and others who are not, right? So I think it's a very variable thing, and it's very much a, okay, well, it's going to depend on the person to some extent, or to a very large extent.
I've seen in several stories, these generation ships having pictograms instead of signs because they think that the language will drift over thousands of years. So people still need to know that this is, do not push this, it's the airlock medium.
They only made that mistake once.
So,
But they're not here anymore to document it, so how is anyone going to know, right?
so I think if you were designing a ship that you expected to last for hundreds, thousands of years, you would have to make it idiot-proof by making it very obvious, you know, that it wasn't just based on one language. But also, we can't make a phone that lasts more than 2 years without a battery dying. So I'm slightly skeptical.
I think we could, we just choose not.
Plan obsolescence is a thing. You really could. Like, but we are, we're not here towards that. So imagine a society could actually restructure itself in order to be able to perpetuate. Like in the universe that I have, the ships are like there's on investors, so it makes sense that there would be some restructures so that, you know, since these ships are actually valued people, then we would actually have the technology to sustain them. Yes, to a certain point.
You don't want to get halfway to Alpha Centauri and have the blue screen of death.
Thank you for a very interesting panel. Thank you for your writing about Sentient Starships. I could ask you if, imagine this situation 100 years, you're standing there on the quayside in some future society, and before you is the Sentient Starship, and, you know, would you step onto it? But I'm not going to ask that, because it's not going to happen. But in 3 years' time, an autonomous taxi is going to draw up outside your house. Which of the panel will get into that autonomous self-driving taxi? Which of you will go, we can do it by show of hands, which one are you going to go, oh no, I've written about it, but I'm not going to do it?
I know too much about autonomous taxis. I'm not getting in one right now.
So I work on autonomous trains, and the answer is I will get on an autonomous train, but the taxi's going to have a lot more work in order to prove that they're safe. But why not? But I'm not sure about the 3 years timeline. I think we're going to extend that slightly more.
I refer you back to my earlier answer about not being an early adopter.
Well, it's very hard for me to drive, and so I'm very much looking forward to a thing that can drive me around.
Hey, we've got a question over here now.
Yeah, what about a spaceship that has to live as a person? Like in Becky Chambers' books with Cedra, having to live in the confine of a body with the senses of a spaceship.
But the ancillaries too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have incarns that are smaller embodiments of my people.
Yeah, I have ships that spend a lot of their time station sites, so
I mean, part of the question is how much processing space do you need to maintain whatever level of artificial intelligence that you are, like, how small can you miniaturize your technology? And that becomes a plot point because we're making it up. Not to put too fine a point on it. So you can, as a writer, you can choose, okay, I can allow my starship, my ship mind to cram themselves into this tiny, tinier object. How much? What do they lose? And that becomes an interesting plot discussion.
I think if you look at Iain M. Banks's ships in the Culture Universe, they would be utterly horrified and disgusted to think that they had to operate on a meat substrate. It would be the worst thing they could possibly think of.
And I think that there's a moment of just having to learn the different bodies, right? Where when you're going, it's an embodiment problem, right? If your limbs are thrusters and your doors, and you're going to something with arms and legs, it's going to take you some time to learn how to do that.
Yeah, but also you're not going to be occupying the same space and presumably fewer sensors and a whole bunch of things. Aside from
I think disconcerting.
Dysphoria.
Yeah.
I've seen footage of astronauts coming back from the International Space Station having to learn how to walk, having to learn not to just let go of things when they finish using them.
I read a lot of these when I was writing about the Xuya ship mines, the return missions.
One final question, I
Oh,
think.
okay, I will try very, very hard to phrase it as a question you can answer quickly. A lot of these sentient starships are like built by humans, or in the case of culture, by like humanoid civilizations. But in, for example, Greg Bear's Anvil of Stars, you have a ship that is built by a civilization completely unlike ours. Humans couldn't have built it, and the humans on it are almost there for some kind of legal, ethical reason. But like, what is the opportunity that because these big smart projects are so much bigger than us, they can be so much smarter than us? So what scope does that give us to like explore that, something that's just so big and clever that it's ineffable to humans?
I think for me, I ran into the problem of like, we can't interface a computer from 30 years ago, and I'm like, okay, so how are we actually going to talk to this mysterious ship? Because, it creates a problem of like, part of the reason why my ships are specifically built by humans and trained by humans is because it makes them culturally compatible, even though they have a different idea of embodiment and occupation of time. I think for me, if I were to write a story like that, the main question would be, okay, so how do you actually understand what the ship is telling you? And that would be based on the plot, right?
And we're back to the IKEA instructions.
Idiot proof for IKEA instructions.
First get another confused looking stick figure.
Do not insert the screwdriver into this.
You certainly rather have IKEA instructions than a clippy helper. It looks like they're trying to build a starship.
If they are so much more incredibly smart than us, then we'll get in and say, can you take us to the Beetlejuice, please?
Right.
And it'll say, no. You don't want to go there. You've made a mess of this place. Sort this out. I'm not taking you anywhere.
Okay, I think we are pretty much at the end of the hour now. I would like to thank the panel enormously for their fascinating contributions and all of the amazing works they've authored collectively. It is quite a library. And I'd like to thank the audience for being awesome and coming up with great questions as well. I hope you've enjoyed the panel, and by all means come up and grab people for a chat if they don't run away fast enough. But thank you all for that help. Hi and welcome. You're clearly, none of you called Darren, because all the Darrens are watching John Robotron in the dark room right now. Instead, you're here to see a selection of big smart objects. My name is Katherine Inskip. I'm an astrophysicist by day, and I edit the young adult science fiction podcast Cast of Wonders by night. And I am here to moderate this panel with a team of incredible experts, who I am massive fans of all of them. And I would like to hand over to them to introduce themselves. So, Elizabeth, do you want to kick off?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Baer. I am the author of the White Space novels, the Ancestral Night, Machine, and forthcoming next year, a book called The Folded Sky, which you get to be some of the first people to hear this announced because we just finalized the paperwork, all of which features sentient starships.
I'm Gareth Powell. I've written 8 books for Titan now, again, all of which feature sentient starships. There's the Embers of War trilogy, featuring the starship Trouble Dog, and the 2 books of the continuance series, which feature a variety of somewhat irascible sentient ships.
Hello, I'm Xuya. I'm an author of science fiction and fantasy with a background in computational neuroscience. I'm also a former co-editor of Escape Pod and the author of the duology Meru and Loka, the second of which comes out on Tuesday, and both of which feature sentient spaceships as well as sentient spacefaring beings that we'll get into more detail later.
Hi, my name is Aliette de Bodard. I'm the author of the Xuya universe books, which feature, surprise sentient spaceships.
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah, these ones are part of family lineages because this series is mostly, also linked out to Vietnamese culture and in particular Vietnamese familial structures. And in my former day job, I used to be working in computer vision and artificial intelligence, not large language models, and don't get me started on learning against things because it's a 5 point. I have it down to a science, but anyway, so I also know a little about robotics and decision and all the kind of algorithms that power this, which is probably a bit relevant to this one.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, obviously, you've all written about sentient spaceships in one form or another as a writer. What draws you to this trope as a reader? I was going to pass down to Aliette, but she's grabbing some water, so I'll start with Elizabeth again instead.
Under the bus. For me as a reader, it's a trope that I've loved since I was reading as a little girl. The idea of, it's the science fictional equivalent of companion animal fantasy, right? You have somebody who really understands you, who is your partner, and with whom you can travel and who makes you more powerful than you are otherwise. So I think that there's a great deal of wish fulfillment in the sentient starship trope. It's like having a best friend who is also your journeying partner.
Yeah, I kind of first came across the idea in sort of a story I was reading about Vikings. And they had an enchanted ship that would go where they told it to. And then in Star Wars, I remember Han was always talking to the Millennium Falcon as if it was a character, and it would play up and it would, not do what he wanted it to do. And I thought, as a somewhat over-imaginative 7-year-old, if R2-D2 and C-3PO can think, why don't they just put brains in the ship? And that can play on, and then obviously McCaffrey's ship we sound. I knew that would get a little there. And obviously, as we're in Scotland, Iain M. Banks' culture novels. And so it just seemed, right from my very first novel, actually, it just seemed quite natural and fun to make the spaceships think, because it seemed quite logical that if you wanted something to keep you safe and not dead in the ghastly vacuum of space, you make it as intelligent and responsive as possible.
Yeah, I think my first exposure to the idea as a reader was Emil Sargent's novel Earthseed, when I was also quite young. And I think it's always more fun when the characters have personality, so why not make your ship a character with personality? And you know, as everyone says, it's nice to be able to interact with them. But I think it just makes for a more interesting story, and I think it also ties a little bit back to our atavistic desires for mounts, right? We've ridden horses and oxen and donkeys, and in the Indian tradition, tigers and flying monkeys, eagles, you name it, right? And all of these creatures, even if they are not as intelligent as humans, and they can't always directly talk to us, I think anyone who has interacted with animals knows they have personalities, and you definitely develop a relationship with them. So having your craft be able to have that kind of personality is really enriching.
I can't actually remember when I encountered the idea first. Like the first one that I remember that I distinctly was interested in was Moya in Farscape. Yeah, and I think for me the attraction of having sentient spaceships is coming at it from a background that is mostly in computer science and being well aware of the frustrations involved in actually making computer things, because they do not think like you. Really not. A computer is basically very good at doing things that we are not very good at doing, and there's a bunch of things that we just do instinctively, like fleeting movements or that kind of thing that we are very, very good at for a bunch of evolutionary reasons. And other things like narrative patterns that we're also very good at, and that computers are just like, so for me, part of the fascination is, okay, so what if we could have computers smart enough to actually have a body, and that body would be a ship, right? So it's different ideas of embodiment as well, and what it means in a concrete fashion, right? So, okay, you have a ship, and it's a big enough ship, and it has a personality, and how does that work out? How do you interact with the ship when you're on the ship? How do you interact with the ship when you are off the ship? What does the ship want? What kind of life is possible? And for me, also, what kind of spaces they would occupy alongside humans, and by spaces not just physical space, but also time, right? Because I'd imagine that if you were going to go to the trouble of building a sentient spaceship, I work in engineering, so I'm also well aware that these are huge and costly projects, and you need to get them into space. You would probably not give it a short lifespan, right? So how would that impact both the sentient starship and the people with whom we had a relationship with?
Thank you. I love that you mentioned Moya. I'm a big fan of Farscape as well, and I've got a piece of Moya framed on my office wall at the moment. It is so fun. Sorry, Moya, they cut you up.
One of the interesting things about Moya as a sentient starship is that she doesn't communicate directly.
No.
It's only through Pilot.
Yeah.
And she and Pilot don't have necessarily the clearest communication always. So I find that is fascinating, because Moya sort of serves as the other. In addition to being the guardian and protector of the protagonist, she's also a foil.
I think it's really an interesting question. I mean, quite a few of you mentioned the idea of the wish fulfillment, the tendency of humans to have mounted beasts of burden, and when you do have sentient spaceships with pilots, to what extent are they just beasts of burden, chattel, companion animal, magical space ponies rather than people?
I'm going to start with magical space ponies.
I mean, if Roger Zelazny can do it, so can you.
I don't see anything wrong with magical space parties.
Yeah.
I want a magical space party.
I know I was going to say, like, what's wrong? Yeah, that sounds like extremely desirable.
No, I think the only thing that I like about going beyond space ponies to something that's a little bit more intelligent and self-aware and capable of communicating is agency and consent. We don't want, hopefully, to exploit and treat our spacecraft, especially our sentient one, as a beast of burden. And so that possibility is always there with magical space ponies. But magically intelligent space ponies. Oh my god, I can't remember the name of the horse in Shira, but who can actually talk back and back talk, I think is a better thing to aim for in fiction, especially.
That was something that was explored quite well in Leckie's ancillary trilogy, was the, lots of good, everyone's ready. I sound clever. The fact of, if we create truly intelligent, sentient, independent beings, shouldn't we just let them do what they want to do? Should we tell them to be our bus drivers? Or should we let them decide what they want to do? It's also something I explored in my trilogy Elders of War with the warship Trouble Dog, who she's built as a warship and she was sort of conditioned, and unfortunately she grew the one thing that a warship doesn't need, which is a conscience. And started questioning her purpose. And I was looking at that as if we build intelligent machines, we run the risk of getting into the kind of problems they do in the film Dark Star, when they're trying to talk an intelligent bomb out of exploding. And also, obviously, Holly and Rendell.
Right. When I was writing the City Universe books, I really wanted to explore the kind of, they've already had the debate and that ships are people, definitely. And then that raises the question of, why is any ship bothering to do any of this, right? So there is a military service for ship, the same as there is for human. There is conscription, and they are actually, same thing, you do your time, and then you leave. And then, it's a question of, there's a limited choice of career option when you're big. When I read Tea Master and the Detective, and the main character, Chef the Sergeant's Child, is a ship who left military service, and it's like, okay, now I need to actually pay for the space that I occupy. And rent is a bit troublesome because it's a lot of space. And so when she was in the army, it was fine, right? Because they paid her a lot, right? And now she's having to make ends meet, and I thought that was an interesting thing to sort of kind of explore, but the underlying assumption is, there are people, and same as people, they have rights, and this, and I know this is not to say that there cannot be excellent books written about this, right? It's just not something I personally was interested in. I was like, okay, we have settled this, and we're gonna just have a society where the attempting mix, and I'm more interested in the kind of like, okay, what kind of spaces will they occupy, and what kind of misunderstandings and understandings can arise between very different set of people who are nevertheless not that different.
Yeah. There's actually a fairly significant plot thread in both Ancestral Night and The Folded Sky that deals with civic service, basically civic duty, because it's a not quite a like Banksian level post-scarcity universe, because there are still resources that need to be managed, but something more like on the level of, say, the Federation, where people's basic needs are met, but there's also an enormous number of resources that get sunk into creating one of these, spaceship or space station class artificial intelligences. So there's a certain amount of public service that they're expected to do as a result. And there's also as with Aliette, there's public service that the human beings are expected to do when necessary. Like, the government works by draft in these books. If you have the requisite skill set and the government needs you, then you get to go do that job, whether you would really rather be exploring space or not. And there are factions within the artificial intelligences that feel that this is unfair. There are factions within the humans that feel that this is unfair. So I feel like it's a very, from a creative perspective, it's an interesting source of conflict if you choose to explore it. But it's also an interesting way of discussing what we owe society, because we're writing books, we're not writing books for the future. I mean, we are, but we're writing books for readers right now who are having the experience of lives right now. And we have to deal with the problems of what we owe our societies, what we owe our cultures, what our cultures owe us. And I feel like in many ways the Sentient Starship is a really useful metaphor for exploring that.
Anyone like to speak further to that point?
Alright, can I jump in a bit? And so one of the things I was trying to do in my novels is go beyond the idea of a craft or a vehicle that is sentient. And I was trying to think, you know, where else can we go? People have done large sentient creatures, you know, space whales, beyond the ponies, right, that can carry passengers inside their bodies. Binti is a great example. Escaping Exodus is another one. And I thought, what about people? As in human beings, but maybe post-humans. And so I went for genetically engineered post-humans that I call alloys, some of whom are very, very large in their bodies, who are as, if not more intelligent than human beings, as capable of giving consent, are people, and there's no question of their rights as people and citizens in this universe. And they can choose to be what they call pilots, who are people who ferry other people within their bodies around space. And kind of a lot of these issues, you know, as Aliette said, like, I wanted to go past this idea of what if it is a person, you know, and is it, and what rights should it have, etc., to, by default, these are people, they are born. They are biological entities who are born as full citizens with all the rights of everyone else. And I think it helps take a different turn to this idea from whether it's, you know, your super smart car or your super smart horse, to this is a society that can have a default assumption of respect for these entities.
I think the way that you've written that novel is, it's really good, and it's almost a direct sort of subversion of the tropes that McCaffrey used in The Ship You Sank, where you have a person who is born with a disability which is not compatible with the standard human lifespan in that setting. What they do, they change her body. Whereas in the case of your work, you have a variety of different bodies, very much at the desires and choice of those individual people. Do you feel that is showcasing a wider acceptance of different body types, as well as what it's saying about personhood?
Yeah, not just body types, but this is a universe in which these post-humans coexist with intelligent machines as well, who are, some of whom are sentient, some of whom are not. And so there is a spectrum, definitely. And I think that's important to show as well, that it doesn't have to be one or the other, that it can be both and many.
We've got a wide variety of different types of sentient starship in fiction. You've got our cyborgs, AI, aliens, biotech. How interchangeable are they as narrative objects, as in the choices you make as a writer? what led you to choose the specific types of starship you did? I mean, was that informed by the stories you wanted to tell, or just what you thought was most fun?
Can I take that one? So actually, I have already told this story as many panels, but this is mainly a reaction to watching Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I swear it's going to make sense, that's So, Padme dies at the end, and I was like, and I know it's been retconned and so on and so forth, and I was like, seriously? You give birth, and then you die? You are a society that is so advanced that you can reattach arms, but you cannot actually protect a pregnant woman with twins. Seriously. And also she did not know that she had twins before that. So I was like, okay, fine, you know what, if I ever build a future society, it is not going to have, it is going to have solved the birth problems, because I do not want to write about that kind of society. And then I was like, okay, but I think the other thing that I'm still interested in, and I think that, you know, that carries over from 19th century fiction, which is one of my other areas of interest, is, well, birth was really dangerous, right? It's an activity for women. It was one of the major causes of mortality for women. And we see that in many cultures throughout the centuries before, I mean, not just the 19th century. And so I was like, okay, fine, but I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, right? So, and I was like, but still, it makes no sense. You know what if they were birthing AIs? And I know about AIs because I'm doing all that computer vision thing. So I'm going to do like an organic ship mind that gets put into a body, and then we're going to work out how that actually works. And so the very first stories in that setting were actually dealing with the, okay, this is how the birth works. And then I sort of went like, okay, and then once the ship is actually born, we need to think through about, okay, how do they grow? How do they integrate in families? How does it actually work out? What kind of relationships do they have with their families? Like, and what happens when the families die, and et cetera, et cetera. And sort of like built upwards from there on. So yeah, I totally played George Lucas. I do want to say I absolutely love Star Wars, but also I don't think that Revenge of the Sith was the high point of Star Wars.
So I think you do get a very different vibe, if nothing else, from a biological starship as opposed to a engineered one. Since everything we're talking about here is alive, you can't really say, you know, living versus non-living. And we're all operating from the premise that our intelligent starships are people, right? I mean, that's one thing that's very plain to me. So the fields are different. The questions that you are raising are different. When you have a biological starship, first of all, there's the question of are they constrained or are they a partner? If they are constrained, and now we're back to Farscape again. This is just the Farscape panel now, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's the future, not a bug.
So when you have, and Sarah Monette and I wrote a series of short pieces, Boojum, Mongoose, and The Wreck of the Charles Dexter Ward, which deal with sort of a Lovecraftian Lewis Carroll in space, with monstrous starships and weird creatures. But the monstrous starships are very monstrous, and they're constrained because if they did not, they would just eat their crews. And sometimes they eat their crews anyway. Sometimes they get out of control. Those are the Boojums. And that's a very different vibe from, here is this joyous space explorer who is my partner in doing salvage work, which is the main artificial intelligence in, I can't even remember the titles of my own books. I'm saying it's only Friday, oh my God, in Ancestral Night. So you can play very different games with your thematic impact depending on how you approach those things. And it occurs to me that I have very rarely seen the trope of the living starship as joyous companion, except for toward the end of Farscape. So That's an interesting piece of work that you're doing, Aliette.
No. Lobbing it to me. Yes, definitely joyous and sometimes a bit more. I don't know that I'm the only one doing that. Some of Aliette's work might cover that. So you can have relationships. I was also actually going back to that early inspiration of Earthseed. That was a generation ship full of teenagers when the book was set, and the ship world, it was like a self-contained world. The ship AI was basically their mothers. So, you know, it was a very caring, protective, nurturing type of relationship, and also we all, maybe not all, but those of you who have raised or are raising teenagers know that it can also be a bit of a fraught relationship.
Never.
Right? I'm in the middle of that myself.
Mine's just preteen, but you know, it's already starting.
Right. And so, but with the world of the alloys, I really wanted to go beyond, again, this sort of one note, right? Where it's not just the passengers, there are no crew because you don't need one. It's not just the passengers having relationships with the pilot alloys, it's them having relationships with each other, right? And I think the culture novels do this to some extent. It's not always a good relationship, but here these are people. These are our descendants 1,000 years from now, and so they have a lot of the same sort of friendships, romantic relationships, contentious relationships that human beings do. And that was really interesting to be able to explore that, but on the scale of, you know, people who are hundreds of meters long.
When I wrote the Embers of War trilogy, and I sat down to design this Sentient Starship that I knew was going to be the main character, I decided to make it difficult for myself and have a sentient starship in a universe where humanity never developed true AI. So, although the ship has got a brain full of processors, right at the heart is several pounds of like organic neurons cloned from a dead soldier. And when you have a sentient warship, I mean, one thing we learned from Terminator is if you have a sentient non-human intelligence, you don't wire your nuclear arsenal up to it. So I thought, how am I going to control it? So in this cloned sort of brain, they've spliced in some canine DNA to promote pack loyalty, so that the ships feel tremendous loyalty to their pack mates. They travel around in small packs. And so that caused, when Trouble Dog develops a conscience, that causes her a great deal of distress because her pack is out to get her and to bring her in. So she, but in reality as well, she's coming into all these emotions, and she says at one point, I'm a 14-year-old girl in the guise of a missile. And that's basically what Aliette was saying. She's a teenager. She's asking all the same questions we ask when we're teenagers. How do I do good? How do I deal with bad things I've done? Where do I fit in? How come everybody else seems to know what they're doing and I don't? And so from that point of view, she's actually the most human character in the book. But that issue of how do we control sentient spaceships, and also how do we control them? Why should they keep us around? Once they built us, they could just yeet us out the airlock and take off for Andromeda.
We hope they're more ethical than we are.
Well, in my book, sometimes they are and sometimes they're not, right?